All right, so this is an introduction to ratios. What is a ratio? All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Our objectives. Kipsters will be able to express a ratio relationship verbally and with a visual representation. All right, so why does this matter, Ms. Brown? Why do we need to learn about ratios? This is a good question. Let's talk about it. But before we do, I want you to take 30 seconds to examine the following pictures and videos. Alrighty. So let's go ahead and go over our pictures. In the first one, we see that there are many different types of muffins. And let's say that we went to a bakery and they said, Miss Brown, you can get 12 different muffins for $20. Okay. I need to be able to identify how many muffins I want of each flavor. And knowing that I also have to be aware of how many more muffins that I can get of each flavor. Okay. The next one, we see two kids racing in the cars. The first thing I'm thinking looking at this picture is, oh my goodness, they're going fast, right? However, when we think about fast, we think about speed. And when we think about speed, the first thing that comes to my mind is miles per hour. This is an example of a ratio. If we're talking miles per hour, we need to know how many miles we can go in each hour. So let's say that these babies are driving 30 miles per hour down the street. If we want to identify how many miles they're going to reach in 2 hours, we multiply. This is how we're finding our ratio, right? All right. And then in the second one, we have two plants. We need to identify how long did it take for my small plant to grow into this large plant, and how many inches did we start off with on this plant, and how tall is it now? These are all examples of ratios. Okay. All right. So what's in a ratio? A ratio shows the relative size of two or more values. All right. I know that we still may have some questions. So let's look at some vocabulary really quick before we move forward. These are things that you need to know. So I know that there are a list of vocabulary terms, but let's focus on a few for today. We need to know what part-to-part ratios are. This is when you're comparing one thing to another. Okay? So girls to boys. We need to know part to whole ratio. This is comparing one item to the total number. So if we're thinking about how many girls are in this classroom out of all of the students, we're comparing one category to the total amount. Okay? We need to know simplest form. So we may have a fraction, but it may not be simplified. We need to understand that simplest form means that the numerator and the denominator cannot be divided any smaller, and that our fraction is in the simplest form there is. Greatest common factor. This is the largest of the common factors. This means that if I have two numbers and I'm looking at the factors, our greatest common factor is the largest factor that we have in comparison between the two numbers. We know that equivalent means equal, and quantity is the total number of something. Those are the only vocabulary words that we need to focus on today because we're just now starting to learn about ratios. Before we move on, let's talk greatest common factor, just as a quick review to make sure that you guys understand. All right, so we have our two factors. We have 12 and we have 16. We know that if we're multiplying, there are different ways that different numbers that we can multiply together in order to get 12 and in order for us to get 16. So we need to start off by finding those factors. In 12, we can do, in the factors of 12, we can do 1 times 12 is 12, 2 times 6 is 12, 3 times 4 is 12, and so on. When we have 16, we know we could do 1 times 16 is 16, 2 times 8 is 16, 4 times 4 is 16, and so on. So if we're looking, we have all of our factors listed, but we want to look for the greatest.